Her grieving millionaire spots a poor girl selling candy outside a hospital. The bracelet on her tiny wrist makes him collapse in tears. What he discovers next will break your heart. Subscribe now for more emotional stories. Grayson Whitmore's expensive shoes clicked against the hospital's polished floor, each step carrying him further from the devastating news about his father's terminal cancer. His throat tightened as he loosened his silk tie, the afternoon sunlight through the glass doors ahead offering no comfort to his darkened thoughts. 4 years as one of Boston's most successful young entrepreneurs hadn't prepared him for the hollowness that now consumed him, first his daughter, now his father, as if fate had marked the Whitmore family for tragedy. Outside, the October air bit at his face, temporarily distracting him from the trembling in his hands as he fumbled for his car keys. Something made him pause, a small, melodic voice cutting through the urban noise. "Would you like some candy, sir? Only $2. Grayson turned, prepared to walk past, when the world suddenly compressed into a single, impossible point of focus. There, on the thin wrist of the little girl with uneven pigtails and a faded dress, sat a bracelet of colored wooden beads, arranged in a distinct pattern of blue, yellow, green, red, and purple, with one misshapen purple heart bead in the center. His breath caught painfully in his chest as recognition flooded his system like ice water. The same bracelet he had helped his daughter Lily make at their kitchen table. The same bracelet she was wearing the day she disappeared. The same bracelet the police had listed in their report 4 years ago. The girl, no more than 7 years old, clutched a small box of homemade chocolate bars, looking up at him with curious hazel eyes, eyes that reflected his own. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, her voice carrying an innocence that cut through Grayson like a blade. His knees weakened as memories crashed against the shores of his consciousness. Lily's laughter as she threaded the beads, her tiny fingers struggling with the elastic string, her proud smile when she finished. "That bracelet," he managed to whisper, his voice breaking. "Where did you get it?" The girl instinctively covered it with her other hand, suddenly protective. "My grandma said my mommy made it for me when I was a baby," she answered, taking a small step backward, sensing the intensity of the stranger's interest. Grayson's vision blurred as tears filled his eyes, his heart hammering so loudly he was certain everyone in the parking lot could hear it. It couldn't be. After 4 years of dead ends, false hopes, and nights spent staring at her empty bedroom. Yet something deeper than reason, more primal than logic, surged within him, a father's intuition screaming that the impossible stood before him. His hand trembled as he reached into his wallet, not for money, but for the worn photograph he always carried. Lily on her 3rd birthday, wearing the bracelet she had made just days before. "I'm sorry if I scared you," he said, trying to steady his voice while crouching down to her eye level. "My name is Grayson. What's yours?" "Mia," she answered cautiously, still clutching her candy box like a shield. "Mia Callahan." The surname sent a jolt through Grayson, unfamiliar, wrong, yet another piece of the horrifying puzzle coming together. His mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Kidnapping, false identity, a life stolen. His daughter, alive but lost to him in plain sight. He forced himself to breathe, to think clearly despite the emotional hurricane tearing through him. "Mia, that's a beautiful name," he said, his voice gentler now. "Do you sell candy here often?" She nodded, some of her wariness fading. "Every Tuesday and Thursday. Grandma Rosa needs medicine, but it's expensive." The simple explanation carried the weight of adult concerns no child should bear, and Grayson felt a surge of both compassion and rage, at her situation, at the years stolen from both of them, at the cruel trick of fate that had reunited them in such circumstances. Grayson pulled out a $100 bill, an absurd amount for candy, and handed it to her. "I'd like to buy all of your candy," he said, knowing he needed more time, more information, but terrified of frightening her away. "And maybe you could tell me more about your bracelet." The mansion on Beacon Hill stood as a monument to success, but its rooms echoed with emptiness as Grayson moved through them like a ghost in his own life. Crystal glasses and expensive furniture gathered dust in corners he no longer visited, rooms he couldn't bear to enter since Lily disappeared and Emma left 6 months later. His housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, watched with concerned eyes as he paced the kitchen, his untouched coffee growing cold beside the file he'd assembled through sleepless nights after meeting Mia. "You need to call Detective Harlow," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of 4 years watching him deteriorate. "If you really think this child might be Lily—" "I know it's her," Grayson interrupted, his voice carrying an intensity that had been absent for years. The bracelet, her eyes, even the small birthmark behind her ear that I glimpsed when the wind blew her hair, everything matches. Mrs. Jenkins sighed, setting down her dishcloth and taking the seat across from him, her weathered hands folding over his trembling ones. Then you need help, proper help, not just your private investigator who'll stir up hope without substance. Grayson's eyes drifted to the refrigerator door where a single magnet held a faded drawing, stick figures of a family, a tall father, a smiling mother, and a little girl between them, all holding hands. Lily had drawn it a week before she vanished from the playground, the last happy memory before their world imploded. Emma had tried to remove it during one of their arguments, and he had shouted at her with such fury that she'd backed away in tears. It was the beginning of the end for their marriage, his obsession with finding Lily and her desperate need to accept the loss and move forward, creating an unbridgeable chasm between them. Now, staring at the childish drawing, Grayson felt something shift inside him, not just determination, but something dangerously close to hope. His fingers moved to his phone, scrolling to find Emma's number among his contacts. 4 years of separate lives, of blame and unbearable pain keeping them apart. Would she even answer? Did she deserve to know about Mia before he was certain? His thumb hovered over her name before he set the phone down again, the weight of potential disappointment too heavy to bear. Instead, he returned to the file, studying the information his investigator had already gathered about Rosa Callahan, a 72-year-old widow living in Dorchester, no criminal record, working part-time as a seamstress despite her age. The hospital visits coincided with her recently diagnosed heart condition, nothing sinister on the surface, nothing to suggest kidnapping or criminal intent. Yet the bracelet remained an inexplicable connection, a beacon cutting through 4 years of darkness. Grayson closed the file and moved to his study, unlocking the bottom drawer of his desk where he kept Lily's things, the tangible remnants of her existence he couldn't bear to pack away. The photographs of their beading afternoon were exactly as he remembered. Lily concentrating with her tongue poking out slightly, the distinctive pattern of beads laid out before her. His breath caught as he examined the pictures more closely. The bracelet in the photos was identical to the one on Mia's wrist, not similar, not reminiscent, but exactly the same, down to the misshapen purple heart bead that had been slightly damaged in the package. The next morning found Grayson parked across from the modest apartment building where Mia lived with Rosa Callahan. His investigator had confirmed their Thursday routine, Rosa walking Mia to school at 7:45, then heading to her seamstress job. The ethical implications of what he was doing pressed against his conscience, but were quickly overridden by 4 years of desperate searching. When the building's front door opened and a small figure in a red coat emerged, holding the hand of an elderly woman, Grayson felt his heart constrict. Mia skipped alongside Rosa, chattering animatedly, her free hand gesturing as she told some story. The easy affection between them was unmistakable, the older woman smiling down with genuine love, adjusting Mia's scarf against the morning chill. The sight created a confusing mixture of emotions in Grayson, relief that Mia appeared well loved, but jealousy and anger that this stranger had experienced the years stolen from him. As they turned the corner, Grayson started his car, decision made. Today he would speak with Rosa Callahan, and by nightfall he would know if his impossible hope was reality. Rosa Callahan's weathered hands trembled slightly as she sorted through spools of thread at Feldman's Fabrics, her part-time workplace for the past 6 years. The bell above the door chimed, but she didn't look up immediately, focused on organizing the new shipment by color. "Mrs. Callahan?" The deep male voice made her spine stiffen instinctively. Something in its tone, controlled yet urgent, triggered a warning in her mind before she even turned to face the tall, impeccably dressed man standing in the shop's entrance. His expensive coat and the luxury watch glimpsed at his wrist marked him as out of place in this modest neighborhood store, but it was the intensity of his gaze that truly alarmed her. "Yes," she answered cautiously, unconsciously stepping behind the counter, creating a barrier between them. "I'm Grayson Whitmore," he said, approaching slowly as if sensing her discomfort. "I met your granddaughter Mia selling candy outside Boston General on Tuesday." Rosa's expression changed instantly, the protective instinct of a caregiver flaring visibly. "What do you want with Mia?" she asked, her voice carrying both defiance and fear. "She's just a child trying to help with my medical bills. She wasn't trespassing." Grayson pulled out his wallet, not for money this time, but for the small photograph he carried everywhere. "Mrs. Callahan, I need to ask you something important, he said, his voice controlled despite the hurricane of emotions beneath the surface. This bracelet that Mia wears, the colorful beaded one, do you know where it came from? The color drained from Rosa's face, her hand gripping the counter edge for support. Her reaction confirmed what Grayson already suspected. There was a story behind the bracelet, one that Rosa feared being discovered. It was a gift, she said after a long pause, each word measured carefully. From her mother before she passed. Grayson placed the photograph on the counter between them, Lily on her 3rd birthday, the identical bracelet clearly visible on her tiny wrist. "This is my daughter, Lily," he said, his voice cracking despite his efforts to remain calm. "She disappeared 4 years ago from a playground in Cambridge. She was wearing this exact bracelet, one she made herself with beads we bought together, one she was wearing when someone took her from us." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity, broken only by the distant ticking of the shop clock and Rosa's increasingly labored breathing. Her eyes darted from the photograph to the store exit, as if calculating an escape that her aging body couldn't possibly execute. "I don't know what you're implying," she finally whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Mia came to me legally. Her mother was my niece. She died shortly after childbirth. There are papers." Grayson leaned forward, his voice low but unyielding. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm not here to accuse you of anything, but that bracelet is unique, made by my daughter's own hands. The chances of another child having the identical bracelet are impossible." He paused, gathering courage for the words that would change everything. "I believe Mia is my daughter Lily, and I intend to confirm it with DNA testing. I've already contacted the authorities." The color drained entirely from Rosa's face, and for a moment Grayson feared she might collapse. Her hand clutched at her chest, a gesture that reminded him suddenly of her heart condition. "Please," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Please don't take her from me. She's all I have." The naked fear in her voice gave Grayson pause. This wasn't the reaction of a kidnapper or someone with malicious intent. This was the terror of a woman who genuinely loved the child in her care. "I need to understand what happened," he said, softening his tone slightly. "How did Mia come to you? Who brought her?" Rosa sank onto the nearby stool, her defenses crumbling under the weight of secrets too heavy to carry any longer. "My nephew Thomas brought her," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "He said she was his girlfriend's child, that the mother had died, that he couldn't care for a little girl on his own. I believed him. He brought papers, birth certificate, everything." She looked up, meeting Grayson's gaze directly for the first time. 2 months later, Thomas was killed in a motorcycle accident. Mia became my world. I never questioned where she came from. I just loved her. The pieces began falling into place in Grayson's mind, not a complex kidnapping ring, but a series of desperate decisions. A child passed from hand to hand until she ended up with someone who truly cared for her. Before Grayson could respond, the shop door chimed again, and a small voice called out, "Grandma Rosa, the school let us out early because the heaters broke." Both adults turned to see Mia bouncing into the shop, her backpack nearly as large as she was, her smile fading as she sensed the tension in the room. She stopped, her eyes moving from her grandmother's tear-stained face to the familiar stranger from the hospital. "You're the candy man," she said simply, moving instinctively to Rosa's side, taking her hand. "Why is Grandma crying?" Grayson felt his heart fracture as he looked at her. This child who was and wasn't Lily, who had built a life and identity separate from everything he had imagined during his years of searching. How did one begin to explain such complexities to a 7-year-old? He crouched down to her eye level, just as he had outside the hospital. "Your grandmother and I were just talking about something important," he said gently. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they talk about important things." Mia's eyes narrowed slightly, too perceptive for her age. "Are you taking Grandma's sewing machine away? Because she needs it to make money for her medicine." The DNA test results lay unopened on Grayson's kitchen island, the official envelope from Boston Regional Laboratory seeming to pulse with potential energy. Detective Harlow sat across from him, her expression professional but compassionate after 4 years of working Lily's case. "Whatever's in that envelope, Grayson, we need to proceed carefully," she cautioned, watching his trembling hands. "If the child is Lily, there are protocols, psychological considerations. We can't simply uproot her from the only home she remembers." Grayson nodded mechanically, having barely slept since his confrontation with Rosa 5 days earlier. The temporary agreement they'd reached, no immediate action until the DNA results allowing Grayson brief supervised visits with Mia in the meantime, had been both blessing and torture. Yesterday, he'd taken them both for ice cream, watching in wonder as Mia chatted about her friends at school, her favorite subjects, the stray cat she'd named Sir Whiskers that visited Rosa's apartment balcony. Every gesture, every laugh seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign, echoes of the 3-year-old he'd lost, blended with personality developments he'd missed entirely. "I've spoken with Emma," Grayson said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "She's flying back from Chicago tomorrow." Detective Harlow raised her eyebrows in surprise. The bitter dissolution of the Whitmores' marriage had been well documented in the case files. "That's unexpected," she commented carefully. Grayson's fingers traced the edges of the envelope, not yet ready to break the seal. "She deserves to know," he said simply. "Whatever pain lies between us doesn't change the fact that she's Lily's mother." The unspoken question hung in the air. If this child proves to be Lily, what then? A custody battle? A forced reunification with parents she no longer remembered? The ethical complexities stretched before them like a labyrinth with no clear path. Taking a deep breath, Grayson finally tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the medical terminology until landing on the conclusion section at the bottom. The paper shook visibly in his hands as he read the results aloud. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. Detective Harlow's professional demeanor softened as she watched tears stream down Grayson's face, tears of vindication, joy, and overwhelming complexity. That evening, Grayson sat in his car outside Rosa's apartment building, rehearsing what he would say, how he would begin to unravel the tangled reality they now faced. As he approached her door, he heard laughter from inside, Mia's high, clear voice and Rosa's deeper chuckle. He hesitated before knocking, suddenly aware that his news would forever alter the happiness contained within. Rosa opened the door, her expression guarded but resigned, as if she'd been expecting this moment from the second she saw him in the fabric shop. "You know, don't you?" she asked quietly, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was small, but meticulously maintained, touches of homemade crafts and Mia's artwork covering the walls. A half-completed puzzle dominated the coffee table, and cartoon music played softly from a small television in the corner where Mia sat, absorbed in her favorite show. "She's my daughter," Grayson confirmed in a whisper, the words both triumphant and heavy with implication. "But I'm not here to take her away tonight. We need to talk about Thomas, about how she came to you, about what happens next." Rosa led him to the tiny kitchen where they could speak without Mia overhearing. She pulled out a shoebox from beneath a loose floorboard, hands trembling as she removed yellowed newspaper clippings about Lily's disappearance, a wrinkled photograph of Thomas, and ultimately, a letter. "He confessed everything before the accident," she admitted, passing Grayson the worn paper. "Thomas was an addict. He and his girlfriend found Lily alone for just a moment at the playground. It was opportunistic, not planned, a terrible decision made by desperate people." Grayson's hands shook as he read Thomas's scrawled confession, the casual description of how easily his world had been shattered, how his daughter became a commodity to be traded for drug money. "They sold her to another couple," Rosa continued, her voice hollow with shame. "But when that couple discovered the manhunt for her, they panicked and gave her back to Thomas. By then, his girlfriend had overdosed. He brought Lily, Mia, to me, with a story about her being his girlfriend's orphaned child." She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I swear I didn't know. When I figured it out months later, after seeing the news, he was already dead. I told myself she was better off loved and safe with me than thrown into the system." From the living room, Mia called, "Grandma, can I have more juice?" The normalcy of the request contrasted sharply with the devastating revelations unfolding in the kitchen. Rosa moved automatically to fulfill the request, her habitual care for Mia unchanged, despite the conversation that threatened to destroy their family unit. Grayson watched as she poured apple juice into a plastic cup with practiced movements, noting the easy affection as Mia thanked her with a quick hug before returning to her cartoon. The scene cut through him. This was Lily's life now, her security, her sense of belonging. Despite the years of searching, despite the legal and moral right to reclaim his daughter, the path forward suddenly seemed less clear. "She calls you the Candyman," Rosa said quietly when she returned to the kitchen. "She liked you, asked if you were going to visit again." She hesitated, then added words that revealed her own heartbreaking acceptance of what was to come. "I've started preparing her, telling her stories about angels who sometimes bring children to people who need them, until their real families can find them again." Emma Whitmore's heels clicked against the hospital corridor, echoing the rapid beating of her heart as she followed Grayson toward the pediatric psychology department. 4 years had etched new lines around her eyes, transformed her once warm demeanor into something more guarded and brittle. "I still can't believe it," she whispered, clutching the DNA results Grayson had shown her upon her arrival from Chicago the previous night. All this time, while we were falling apart, blaming each other, she was alive just across the city. Grayson nodded, unable to find adequate words for the swirl of emotions that had kept him awake for days. They had once been so in sync, completing each other's sentences, moving through life as a seamless unit. Now they walked side by side as strangers, connected only by the shared trauma of loss and the miraculous possibility of reunion. Dr. Levine, a specialist in childhood trauma and identity issues, was waiting in her office, her expression professional but kind as she gestured for them to sit. "I've reviewed Lily's case," she began gently, "and I've spoken with her and Mrs. Callahan yesterday. I need to emphasize something crucial before we discuss the transition plan. From Mia's perspective, Rosa Callahan is her grandmother. That's her reality, her security, her entire foundation." Emma's face crumpled slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. "But we're her parents," she whispered. "Surely that counts for something, some biological connection she might feel, some memory buried deep down." Dr. Levine's expression remained compassionate, but firm. Children Mia's age form their sense of security through consistent caregiving relationships. The bond with Mrs. Callahan is real and vital to her psychological well-being. Any transition must honor that relationship rather than sever it. The implication hung heavily in the room, the fantasy of simply reclaiming their daughter and returning to life as it was 4 years ago was just that, a fantasy. Grayson reached for Emma's hand without thinking, an instinctive gesture from their shared past. To his surprise, she didn't pull away, her fingers intertwining with his in silent acknowledgement of the complex journey ahead. "What do you suggest, then?" Grayson asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "How do we become parents to a child who doesn't know us?" Dr. Levine outlined a gradual transition plan, initial visits with Rosa present, slowly increasing in duration and frequency, with careful attention to Mia's emotional responses at each stage. "The goal isn't to replace Mrs. Callahan," she emphasized, "but to expand Mia's sense of family to include you both." She paused, then added the most difficult truth. "This will take months, not days or weeks, and there may be setbacks, confusion, anger, grief, as she processes these changes." Emma's grip on Grayson's hand tightened painfully. "Will she ever truly see us as her parents?" she asked, the question betraying her deepest fear. Dr. Levine's answer was honest rather than reassuring. "She will form a relationship with you both. The nature of that relationship will develop organically and may not match your memories or expectations of parenting a 3-year-old Lily. The 7-year-old Mia is a different child shaped by different experiences." On their way out of the hospital, Emma stopped abruptly in the corridor, turning to face Grayson fully for the first time since her arrival. "I blamed you," she said quietly, tears gathering in her eyes, "for looking away at the playground, for not watching her closely enough. I made you the villain because it was easier than accepting that terrible things happen randomly, without reason." Later that week, Grayson and Emma sat nervously at a table in a family-friendly restaurant, waiting for Rosa to arrive with Mia. They had chosen neutral territory for this first official meeting, somewhere public but quiet, with activities to occupy a child during uncomfortable moments. Emma repeatedly rearranged the crayons and paper they'd brought, a gesture so reminiscent of her pre-loss behaviors that Grayson felt a pang of recognition. When the door opened and Mia entered, holding Rosa's hand and wearing a blue dress clearly saved for special occasions, both Whitmore's breath caught simultaneously. "She has your smile," Emma whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "And your eyes." Grayson nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Rosa guided Mia to their table, her expression a complex mixture of resignation and protective concern. "Mia," she said gently, "these are the special friends I told you about, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore." Mia regarded them with curious but cautious eyes, clinging slightly to Rosa's hand. "Hello," she said politely, the single word carrying the weight of worlds colliding. Emma reached out slowly, offering Mia a small gift box. "We heard you like butterflies," she said softly, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill. "We brought you something we thought you might like." Inside the box was a delicate butterfly hair clip with colorful, twinkling stones, beautiful but not ostentatiously expensive, a thoughtful gift rather than an attempt to buy affection. Mia's eyes widened with genuine delight as she lifted it carefully from its box. "It's so pretty," she breathed, turning to Rosa. "Can I wear it now, Grandma?" The interaction that followed, Rosa gently securing the clip in Mia's hair, the child's beaming smile as she peeked at her reflection in a spoon, was both heartwarming and heartbreaking for the watching parents. They were witnesses to a loving relationship they hadn't built, observers of their own child's happiness created without them. As the meal progressed, Mia gradually warmed to them, showing Emma her school drawing of a butterfly garden and proudly telling Grayson that she could count to 100 in Spanish. Each revelation was a precious gift and a painful reminder of all they had missed. When Mia excused herself to visit the restroom with Rosa's help, Emma turned to Grayson, her expression raw with emotion. "She's amazing," she whispered, "so bright and kind and completely herself. Rosa did that, raised her to be wonderful without us." The acknowledgement carried no bitterness, only the beginning acceptance of a reality more complex than the black and white narrative of kidnapping and rescue they had clung to for 4 years. The playground was nearly empty on the chilly Saturday morning, save for Mia swinging joyfully under Rosa's watchful eye and Grayson sitting tensely on a nearby bench. 3 weeks of careful visits had built a fragile foundation of familiarity between them, with Emma flying back and forth from Chicago each weekend to participate in what Dr. Levine called family integration sessions. Today marked a significant milestone, the first time Grayson would spend 2 hours alone with Mia without Rosa directly present, though she would remain nearby at the park cafe within sight. As Rosa prepared to leave them, Mia's carefree expression clouded slightly. "You'll just be over there, right, Grandma?" she confirmed, pointing to the cafe. "Right where I can see you." Rosa nodded, adjusting Mia's scarf against the autumn breeze. "Mr. Whitmore is going to push you on the swings, and I'll be watching the whole time," she reassured her. "Remember what we talked about being brave and making new friends." The exchange twisted something in Grayson's chest, the careful way Rosa was preparing Mia for transitions, honoring her attachment needs, while gradually creating space for new relationships. Once alone with Mia, Grayson discovered that planned activities and conversation starters evaporated in the face of actual interaction with this child, who was simultaneously his daughter and a stranger. He pushed her on the swings as promised, listening to her delighted squeals of "higher, higher" that echoed across the years from the 3-year-old Lily, who had once demanded the same. When she tired of swinging, they moved to the sandbox, where Mia methodically built what she called a castle for tiny people. Working beside her, helping to shape towers from damp sand, Grayson found himself relaxing into the simple pleasure of shared activity. "My friend Zoe says everyone has a daddy," Mia said suddenly, her focus remaining on the sandcastle. "I told her mine died when I was a baby, but Grandma Rosa says that might not be true." The casual statement, delivered without looking up, nearly stopped Grayson's heart. He struggled to find an appropriate response, acutely aware that this moment could become a pivotal memory for both of them. "What else did Grandma Rosa tell you?" he asked carefully, continuing to shape the sand tower to maintain the casual atmosphere. "She said that sometimes children get lost from their parents, and sometimes they get found again," Mia replied, adding a leaf as a flag to her tallest tower. "And that you and Mrs. Whitmore lost a little girl a long time ago who looked just like me." She finally looked up, her hazel eyes, Emma's eyes, meeting his directly. "Is that true? Am I your lost girl?" The simplicity of the question belied its emotional magnitude. Grayson felt tears forming despite his determination to remain calm and reassuring. "Yes," he answered softly. "We believe you are. We've been looking for you for a very long time." Mia considered this information with surprising composure, returning her attention to the sandcastle. "Was my name different before?" she asked after a moment. "It was Lily," Grayson confirmed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lily Elizabeth Whitmore." Mia tested the name quietly. Lily, as if trying on an unfamiliar piece of clothing. "I don't remember being called that," she admitted. "I've always been Mia." The statement carried no apology or distress, simply a child's honest assessment of her reality. Later, as they shared hot chocolate at a picnic table, Mia suddenly asked, "If you're my real dad, does that mean I have to leave Grandma Rosa?" The question pierced Grayson's carefully maintained composure. 4 years of imagining his daughter's return had never included the complication of her attachment to someone else. someone who, despite the circumstances, had loved and cared for her with genuine devotion. His instinctive answer would have once been an unequivocal yes. Of course, his daughter would return to her rightful home, her rightful life. But watching Mia's anxious expression as she glanced toward the cafe where Rosa sat, Grayson recognized the cruelty inherent in such simplicity. "No, sweetheart," he said, choosing his words with careful deliberation. "Grandma Rosa will always be part of your life. We're just figuring out how everyone fits together now." Relief visibly washed over Mia's features, followed by cautious curiosity. "Could Grandma Rosa come see your big house sometime? She said it's very fancy." The innocent request opened a door Grayson hadn't considered, not just carefully scheduled visits and gradual transitions, but the possibility of true integration, of expanding their family circle rather than replacing one with another. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he replied, surprising himself with how right it felt. "Maybe next weekend you could both come for lunch." Emma placed the final photo on the memory board they had created for Mia, a smiling toddler Lily feeding ducks at the public garden, her chubby hands throwing breadcrumbs with wild abandon. The Whitmore mansion's sunroom had been transformed over the past weeks, child-sized furniture appearing alongside art supplies and books carefully selected to match Mia's current interests. Today marked a significant milestone, Mia's first overnight stay, with Rosa reluctantly agreeing to remain in the guest suite rather than returning to her apartment. "Do you think we're rushing this?" Emma asked, straightening a frame for the 10th time. "Dr. Levine said she's adjusting well, but still, overnight is different." Grayson understood her anxiety. It mirrored his own. 2 months of progressive visits had built a tentative relationship with Mia, but the fragility of their new family unit remained painfully apparent. Each time Mia called them Mr. Grayson and Ms. Emma, rather than Mum and Dad, each time she checked for Rosa's reassuring presence before trying something new with them, these moments served as reminders of the delicate nature of their reconnection. When the doorbell rang, Emma's hand instinctively found Grayson's, a gesture becoming increasingly frequent as they navigated this journey together. The divorce papers, half completed before Mia's discovery, remained unsigned in Grayson's desk drawer, their urgency fading as old wounds began the slow process of healing through shared purpose. Rosa entered first, carrying a small overnight bag painted with butterflies, Mia following closely behind, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I brought Sir Whiskers," she announced, holding up a well-loved stuffed cat. "Grandma said he could help me not miss home too much." The simple statement reminded them all of the reality. To Mia, Rosa's apartment was home, not this mansion with its polished floors and expensive furniture. Dinner progressed with an awkward formality that even Mia seemed to sense, her usual chatter subdued as she carefully used the fancy fork Emma had gently identified for her. When she accidentally knocked over her water glass, her face crumpled in immediate distress. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she cried, looking frantically toward Rosa as if expecting punishment. The reaction revealed volumes about her insecurities in this new environment. Emma moved quickly, kneeling beside Mia's chair. "It's just water, sweetheart," she said softly, dabbing at the spill with her own napkin. "Everyone spills things sometimes. When I was little, I once spilled an entire bowl of spaghetti on my dad's white shirt right before an important meeting." The anecdote coaxed a small smile from Mia, the tension in her small shoulders easing slightly. Across the table, Grayson watched the interaction with a tightness in his chest, witnessing Emma's natural maternal instincts re-emerging after years of suppressing memories too painful to acknowledge. Later that evening, as they prepared for bedtime, Rosa lingered in the doorway of the guest room adjacent to Mia's newly decorated bedroom. "She's never slept without me nearby," she said quietly to Emma, who was arranging Mia's stuffed animals on her new bed. "Sometimes she has nightmares, not often, but when she does, she calls for me." The implied question hung between them. Would Emma know how to comfort Mia if needed? Would Mia accept comfort from someone she still viewed as essentially a stranger? Emma's throat tightened with emotion. "What does she need when she has nightmares?" she asked, setting aside pride for practicality. Rosa's expression softened at Emma's willingness to learn rather than assume. "She likes her hair stroked, 3 gentle songs sung, always 'You Are My Sunshine' last, and a glass of warm milk with honey," she explained. "And she needs to be told that the monster isn't real, that she's safe, that morning will come soon." The specificity of the routine, developed over years of loving attention, struck Emma with both gratitude and grief. Gratitude that Mia had been so tenderly cared for, grief that these intimate details of her own child were knowledge she had to acquire second-hand. When the inevitable nightmare came near midnight, it was Mia's frightened cry of "Grandma" that pierced the silence of the large house. By the time Emma and Grayson reached her room, Rosa was already there, gathering the trembling child into her arms with practiced movements. "The monster was chasing me again," Mia sobbed, her face pressed against Rosa's nightgown. He had sharp teeth and red eyes. Rather than hovering awkwardly or insisting on taking over, Emma quietly retrieved the promised warm milk from the kitchen, while Grayson pulled a chair closer to Mia's bed, sitting in silent solidarity. When Rosa began singing softly, her aging voice still carrying a melodic comfort, developed over countless nights of similar rituals, Emma joined for the final verse of "You Are My Sunshine," her clear soprano blending with Rosa's weathered alto in an unexpected harmony that seemed to symbolize their shared love for the child between them. Mia's eyes, heavy with returning sleep, moved between the three adults surrounding her bed, a small smile forming as she drifted back to dreams, this time peaceful ones. It was Rosa who broke the silence after Mia fell asleep, her voice thick with emotion, but resolute. "She needs all of us," she whispered, looking directly at Emma and Grayson. "I think I finally understand that now." The courthouse hallway stretched before them like an institutional gauntlet, fluorescent lights emphasizing the pallor on Rosa's face as she clutched her purse with white-knuckled hands. 4 months of gradually increasing integration had led to this moment, the legal hearing that would determine Mia's official custody arrangements. Detective Harlow nodded toward Grayson and Emma as they approached, her expression professional, but with the underlying warmth developed throughout the years she'd worked Lily's case. "Judge Williams is fair," she assured them quietly. "She'll prioritize Mia's best interests above everything else." The unspoken concern hung heavily in the air. What exactly constituted best interests in a case with no clear precedent? The discovery of a kidnapped child, alive and well-adjusted with a caregiver who had no knowledge of the crime, created legal and ethical complexities that standard custody proceedings weren't designed to address. Emma reached for Rosa's trembling hand, a gesture that would have been unimaginable months earlier. "Whatever happens in there," she said softly, "we promised Mia that we're all still her family. We meant it." Inside the judge's chambers, a private hearing arranged to protect Mia from media attention, their attorney presented the unusual proposal they'd crafted with Dr. Levine's guidance: joint legal custody between the Whitmores and Rosa Callahan, with a gradually transitioning physical custody arrangement designed to prioritize Mia's emotional security. The district attorney frowned, legal pad filled with counter-arguments. "Your Honor, while the circumstances are unusual, the law is clear. These are the biological parents of a kidnapped child. Mrs. Callahan, regardless of her intentions or lack of involvement in the original crime, has no legal standing." Judge Williams, a silver-haired woman with penetrating eyes, studied Rosa over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Callahan, you understand that legally, you could lose all rights to see the child you've raised as your granddaughter." Rosa nodded, tears spilling despite her attempts at composure. "I understand, Your Honor. I just want what's best for Mia. She deserves to know her real parents, to have the life they can give her." The simple dignity of her response, putting Mia's needs above her own desperate fear of losing her, seemed to affect everyone in the room. Dr. Levine's testimony proved pivotal, her professional assessment unequivocal. Forcibly and completely separating Mia from the only caregiver she remembers would constitute a second trauma, one that could potentially cause more psychological harm than the original kidnapping she doesn't consciously remember. She presented research on attachment disruption, explaining how Mia's sense of security and ability to form healthy relationships in the future depended significantly on how this transition was handled. The Whitmores and Mrs. Callahan have demonstrated remarkable capacity to put aside their own pain and work together for Mia's benefit, she concluded. The arrangement they're proposing, while unusual, represents the best possible outcome for this child's emotional well-being. Judge Williams removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose thoughtfully. After a long silence, she looked directly at Grayson and Emma. "I've handled custody cases for 20 years, and I've never seen biological parents advocate to share custody with someone who, however innocently, ended up raising their kidnapped child. Why this solution rather than the full custody you're legally entitled to?" Grayson glanced at Emma before responding, their months of difficult conversations and soul-searching evident in his measured words. "Because loving our daughter means loving her completely. Not just the parts of her we expected or the child we lost 4 years ago. Mia formed her sense of safety and family with Rosa. Tearing that away might satisfy our legal right for justice, but it wouldn't heal our daughter. Emma continued where he left off, their thoughts flowing together as they once had in happier times. We've lost 4 years we can never get back, but Rosa gave those years to Mia, filled with love and security. We're grateful, not resentful, and Mia loves her grandmother. That's what she calls Rosa, and that's who Rosa is to her. Breaking that bond would break something in Mia that might never heal. The judge's expression softened almost imperceptibly at their words. When she finally rendered her decision, approving their proposed arrangement with minor modifications, Rosa covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs of relief. Outside the courthouse, as reporters gathered at a respectful distance, Grayson found himself placing a steadying hand on Rosa's shoulder. "Let's go home," he said simply. "Mia's waiting." That evening, as Mia bounced excitedly between the 3 adults in the Whitmores' living room, her awareness of the day's significance limited to the understanding that the judge said we can all be family together. Grayson observed Emma and Rosa working side by side in the kitchen. Emma was showing Rosa how to use the elaborate coffee machine, their conversation punctuated by occasional laughter, as Rosa recounted stories of Mia's earliest attempts at helping in the kitchen. The normalcy of the scene, 2 women from vastly different worlds finding common ground in shared love for a child, struck him with unexpected force. His phone buzzed with a text from his father's hospice nurse. "Not much time left. He's asking for you." The reminder of his father's terminal condition, the reason he'd been at the hospital the day he discovered Mia, created a jarring contrast with the domestic peace unfolding before him. Life and death, finding and losing, all happening simultaneously. When he shared the news with Emma, her response was immediate. "We should all go. You, me, and Mia. She should meet her grandfather before—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Grayson understood. Another piece of family being constructed even as one was being lost. When Rosa overheard their hushed conversation, she stepped forward with quiet dignity. "I can stay here if it would be easier," she offered. "This is family time for you." Grayson studied her face, the woman who had unknowingly raised his missing daughter, who had agreed to share custody despite her fear of losing Mia entirely, who continued to put Mia's needs above her own at every turn. "You are family now too," he said with sudden conviction. "If you're comfortable coming, we'd like you there." The surprise and gratitude in Rosa's eyes revealed how significant the inclusion was, not just tolerance or polite accommodation, but genuine acceptance. When they told Mia they were going to meet her grandfather, who was very sick in the hospital, her response displayed the emotional intelligence that continued to amaze them. "Should I draw him a picture to make him feel better?" she asked seriously. "When I was sick with strep throat, Grandma Rosa said my drawings were the best medicine." The 4 of them, an unlikely family forged through tragedy and healing, gathered their coats, Mia's hand trustingly in Grayson's as they headed toward the hospital where their remarkable journey had begun. The hospice room was quiet except for the rhythmic sound of oxygen assistance and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. William Whitmore, once a commanding presence in Boston's business community, now lay diminished against starched white pillows, his skin nearly translucent with illness. When Grayson entered with Mia's small hand in his, the old man's eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Grayson nodded, emotion constricting his throat. "Dad, this is Mia, our Lily. We found her." The moment carried a poignant symmetry. Grayson had received the diagnosis of his father's terminal cancer the very day he discovered his daughter selling candy outside this same hospital. Now, as life prepared to leave one generation, it had miraculously been restored in another. William's trembling hand reached toward Mia, who approached the bed with solemn curiosity rather than fear. "Hello," she said, with the direct simplicity of childhood. "I'm sorry you're sick. I drew you a butterfly picture to help you feel better." The old man's eyes filled with tears as he accepted her artwork, a riot of colorful butterflies surrounding stick figures of what she had carefully labeled "My Family," Grayson, Emma, Rosa, and herself, all holding hands beneath a smiling sun. Later that evening, after Mia had been taken home by Emma and Rosa, Grayson sat beside his father's bed, the 2 men sharing a silent communion that transcended their complicated history. William had been a demanding father, pushing Grayson toward excellence with criticism more often than praise, expecting his son to continue the Whitmore legacy with the same single-minded focus that had built their fortune. Their relationship had fractured further after Lily's disappearance, William's insistence that Grayson move forward, and Emma's eventual departure seeming like betrayals when Grayson needed support most. Yet now, with the wisdom granted by approaching death, William broke their silence with unexpected words. "I was wrong," he admitted, each word costing precious energy. "About how to be a father, about what matters. I pushed too hard, loved too conditionally." Grayson felt decades of tension begin to unravel at the simple acknowledgement. "You did your best, Dad," he offered, surprising himself with the genuine forgiveness in his voice. William shook his head slightly. "No, but you are. With her. With Mia. I saw it in how she trusts you already." 2 days later, William Whitmore passed peacefully with Grayson at his bedside. The funeral brought business associates and social connections from across the country, most expressing shock at the radical changes in Grayson's personal circumstances, the reconciliation with Emma, the discovery of his kidnapped daughter, and most surprisingly, the integration of Rosa Callahan into their family unit. At the reception following the service, Grayson overheard one of his father's oldest friends commenting to another, "Never thought I'd see a Whitmore sharing custody with a seamstress from Dorchester. William must be turning in his fresh grave." The comment might once have stung with its implied judgment of their unconventional arrangement. Now Grayson found himself smiling slightly as he watched Mia carefully helping Rosa arrange cookies on a serving tray, the elderly woman's patient guidance and the child's earnest concentration forming a tableau of ordinary love that transcended class boundaries and social expectations. When Emma joined them, kneeling to help when several cookies tumbled to the floor, the three of them laughing together over the minor disaster, Grayson recognized the truth. His father had accumulated wealth and power, but what Grayson had found was infinitely more valuable: the courage to redefine family based on love rather than convention or pride. The reading of William's will the following week brought another unexpected development. In addition to the substantial inheritance left to Grayson, a separate trust had been established for Mia's education and future needs. Most surprisingly, a modest but significant sum had been designated for Rosa Callahan, with a handwritten note attached, "For the woman who kept my granddaughter safe when we could not." The acknowledgement from beyond the grave represented a final validation of their unusual family structure, one that moved Rosa to tears when Grayson shared it with her. "I never expected," she began, unable to complete the thought. Grayson understood her amazement. His father had been known for his rigid adherence to social hierarchies, not for recognizing value in those outside his privileged circle. Yet, something about meeting Mia, seeing the results of Rosa's loving care despite her limited resources, had penetrated decades of class consciousness in William's final days. "He recognized what really matters in the end," Grayson said simply, "just as we're all learning to do." That evening, as they finalized plans to help Rosa move into the garden cottage on the Whitmore estate, close enough for Mia's security, separate enough for Rosa's independence, Grayson found himself reflecting on how thoroughly his priorities had shifted. The corporate empire that had once consumed his every waking moment now seemed secondary to these domestic arrangements, to the careful construction of a family pieced together from fragments of pain and unexpected grace. Emma's decision to transfer permanently back to Boston came as both a surprise and an inevitability. Over dinner at what had once been their favorite restaurant, she laid out her plans with characteristic precision. "I've accepted a position at Boston Children's Hospital," she explained, turning her wine glass slowly between her fingers. "And I've found an apartment in Cambridge, close enough to be present for Mia, separate enough for us to figure out whatever this is becoming between us." Grayson nodded, understanding her need for independence after years of separate lives. Their reconciliation, born of shared purpose rather than rekindled passion, remained tentative, rebuilding trust brick by careful brick. "And what is this becoming?" he asked quietly, the question encompassing the personal transformation they'd both undergone since Mia's discovery. Emma considered her answer carefully before responding, her eyes meeting his with a directness that had been absent during their bitter separation. "I think we're learning to be partners again, not the same people we were before, but maybe better versions, people who can put someone else's needs above their own pain." She paused, then added with gentle honesty, "I don't know if that means we'll find our way back to being husband and wife again, but I do know we're becoming better parents together than we ever could have been apart." 1 year later, the Whitmore estate gardens bloomed with spring flowers, tables arranged beneath flowering cherry trees for Mia's 8th birthday celebration. Children from her school raced across the expansive lawn, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze as Emma supervised a face-painting station and Rosa arranged homemade cookies on colorful platters. The integration that had begun so tentatively had evolved into a new normal. Mia spending weekdays in the main house with Grayson and Emma, weekends often including overnight stays in Rosa's cottage, all 3 adults attending school functions and doctor appointments as a united front. The unusual arrangement had raised eyebrows initially, but the synchronicity they'd developed as co-parents gradually silenced most criticism. Watching from the patio, Grayson marveled at Mia's joyful exuberance as she led her friends in an impromptu dance performance. The nightmares that had plagued her during the transition period had largely subsided. She now moved between her 3 parental figures with comfortable ease, secure in the knowledge that her expanding family meant more love, not less stability. Dr. Levine, invited as both a friend and professional support, joined Grayson on the patio. "She's thriving," she observed, nodding toward Mia. "You've all done remarkable work this past year." Grayson smiled, acknowledging the compliment while remembering the difficult moments behind their success, Mia's occasional emotional outbursts when transitions triggered insecurity, the delicate negotiations between 3 adults with different parenting styles, the gradual process of earning her trust, not as the candy man, but as dad. "We had our rocky moments," he admitted. "But somehow we always found our way back to what matters most. What Mia needs, not what any of us expected or wanted for ourselves." Dr. Levine nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why it's working. So many parents in conflict forget that simple priority." She hesitated, then added with professional candor, "You know, when I first met with you and Emma, I was concerned that your reconciliation might be temporary, born of shared purpose, rather than rebuilt connection. But watching you together today," she left the observation unfinished as Emma approached, carrying a tray of lemonade. The easy synchronicity between them as Grayson automatically reached to help, their hands brushing comfortably, small smiles exchanged, spoke volumes about the gradual healing that had occurred in their marriage, alongside their daughter's recovery. As twilight softened the garden, the last guests departed, leaving only the core family, Grayson, Emma, and Rosa, cleaning up while Mia examined her birthday gifts with contented exhaustion. "Time for cake," Rosa called, bringing out a special cake she'd saved for just the 4 of them, a family tradition she'd maintained throughout Mia's life, now incorporated into their blended celebrations. As Mia blew out the candles on her second cake of the day, Grayson noticed something remarkable. She made her wish with eyes open, watching the faces around her rather than squeezing her eyes shut, as most children did. When Emma asked what she'd wished for, expecting the usual childhood denial based on the superstition that spoken wishes wouldn't come true, Mia surprised them all with her answer. "I didn't need to wish for anything," she said simply. "I already have everything I wanted." The statement, profound in its childlike directness, brought unexpected tears to Grayson's eyes. 1 year ago they had all been broken in different ways, he and Emma shattered by loss and mutual blame, Rosa isolated and anxious about losing the child she'd raised, Mia secure in her limited world, but missing the expanded love of her biological family. Now through painful honesty, difficult compromises, and the deliberate choice to put love above pride, they had created something whole from those broken pieces. Later that evening, as Rosa prepared to walk back to her cottage with Mia, who had requested a special sleepover with Grandma as her final birthday treat, Grayson found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The bracelet that had triggered their impossible reunion sat in a special keepsake box in Mia's room, retired when the elastic wore thin, preserved as a tangible reminder of how fate had worked through colored wooden beads and an improbable coincidence outside a hospital. Emma joined him on the porch, watching Rosa and Mia's retreating figures, hand in hand, crossing the moonlit garden toward the cottage. "She still calls herself Mia," Emma observed softly. "Do you ever regret that she didn't want to be Lily again?" Grayson considered the question carefully before shaking his head. "She is who she is. All of her experiences, with Rosa and with us, made her who she is today. Trying to erase those years, even just symbolically with a name change, would have been trying to erase part of her." Emma nodded in understanding, leaning against him slightly as the evening chill descended. "I used to dream about the moment we'd find her, imagined it would fix everything broken inside me," she admitted. "But it wasn't finding her that healed us. It was learning to love her as she is, not as we remembered or imagined. The simple truth resonated between them as they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the cottage lights illuminate Rosa's windows as she and Mia settled in for their special night together. The journey from that fateful day outside the hospital had transformed them all, teaching hard lessons about forgiveness, redefining their understanding of family, challenging assumptions about healing and redemption. As if reading his thoughts, Emma took Grayson's hand in hers, her fingers intertwining with his in the gesture that had become their silent communication of partnership. "It's not the family we planned," she said softly, "but it's the family we needed." Grayson squeezed her hand in agreement, remembering the broken man he had been a year ago, driven by grief and obsession, unable to move forward, trapped in the amber of loss. The path to healing had come not through reclaiming the past, but through embracing an unexpected present, finding strength in vulnerability, and redefining victory not as possession, but as shared love. As they turned to go inside together, the garden cottage glowing warmly in the distance, like a beacon of their expanded definition of family, Grayson felt a sense of completion that transcended the circumstances of their reunion. In losing and finding their daughter, they had ultimately found themselves and each other, transformed by love's capacity to create wholeness from fragments, family from strangers, and redemption from life's most painful circumstances.